This is Donald J. Trump, the 45th and, God willing, 47th President of the United States. On October 31st, Trump was being interviewed by Tucker Carlson, and while talking about disastrous foreign policy, former Congresswoman Liz Cheney's name came up.
But the reason she couldn't stand me is that she always wanted to go to war with people. I don't want to go to war. She wanted to stay in Syria. I took them out. She wanted to stay in Iraq. I took them out. I mean, if it were up to her, we'd be in 50 different countries. And you know, number one, it's very dangerous. Number two, a lot of people get killed. And number three, I mean, it's very, very expensive. That's why we owe $36 trillion. She's a radical war hawk. Let's put her with a rifle standing there with 9 barrels shooting at her, okay? Let's see how she feels about it. You know, when the guns are trained on her face. You know, they're all war hawks when they're sitting in Washington in a nice building saying, oh, gee, let's send 10,000 troops right into the mouth of the enemy.
So what Trump is saying, and this is an objective analysis, that Liz Cheney is a war hawk, and that she might feel differently about war if she had first-hand experience of war or combat. Pretty simple stuff, right? But, you know, if you're the dominant media, you're not allowed to show any objectivity towards the bad orange man.
Tonight, breaking news as we come on the air, Donald Trump at a campaign event, imagining guns shooting at Liz Cheney. Tonight, Kamala Harris says this kind of violent rhetoric makes Trump unqualified to be president. Just 4 days to go, and the tiny sliver of undecided voters in this country could decide this race. Tonight, Donald Trump at that campaign event, imagining guns shooting at Liz Cheney, suggesting guns should be trained at her face. Vice President Kamala Harris says the country needs to turn the page on all of this, saying violent rhetoric from Trump makes him unqualified to be president again.
You see what's happening there, right? David Muir of ABC News is painting Trump as a violent lunatic and praising Kamala Harris as the sane voice of reason, which is hilarious considering that just 1 week prior, Harris called Trump a fascist and everyone who attended his rallies as Nazis.
Donald Trump took his violent rhetoric to a new extreme, suggesting the former Republican Congresswoman should be fired upon.
Saying, quote, war hawk Liz Cheney should be fired upon.
Former President Donald Trump is escalating his violent rhetoric, suggesting one of his most prominent critics, the former Congresswoman Liz Cheney, should be fired upon.
Right now on ABC News Live, she should have guns trained on her face. 4 days to Election Day, and Donald Trump's rival Liz Cheney becomes the latest target of his violent rhetoric.
The reality is, you're talking about guns trained on a political opponent, regardless of the context.
Guns being trained on a political opponent's head.
Now this latest comment about 9 barrels pointed at Liz Cheney is the latest escalation.
Let's see how she feels when the guns are trained on her face. Let's sit with that for a moment.
So obviously, Donald Trump was taken out of context by design, because if you hear Trump wants to point guns at Liz Cheney's head, well, that's incredibly provocative. Most Americans would be and should be appalled by that kind of language. That is, you know, unless they heard the entire quote in context.
Donald Trump suggests putting Liz Cheney in the firing line.
Wait, did he suggest it or did he outright say it?
Donald Trump declaring before a crowd that Cheney should be put before a firing line.
I mean, that's more definitive, but now it's less accurate.
The former president saying that he would like to see guns aimed at Liz Cheney's face.
Trump never said, I would like to see guns aimed at her face. It's one thing to take Trump out of context. It's another to lie about the words that are coming out of his mouth.
Trump invoked violence on Liz Cheney after saying, let's put her with a rifle standing there with 9 barrels shooting at her. You just can't make this up.
Yeah, you can. I mean, Trump wasn't invoking violence, but Kira Phillips, you know, made it up. Now look, I'm no stranger to criticizing Donald Trump. If he actually called for violence against someone, I would be among the first to call him out. I would not be making excuses for it.
Donald Trump taking on Liz Cheney, telling his supporters that she should be shot.
He directly said what he
think should happen to Liz Cheney just because she disagrees with him.
He has suggested that she should be shot.
Explicitly violent about a woman in public life, Liz Cheney.
Just unimaginably violent and loaded comments about Liz Cheney.
Openly fantasizing about violent retribution against one of his political opponents.
Well, clearly he was saying that she should be shot.
Are you angry yet? Well, you should be, because these are some of the most blatant examples of media bias that I've ever seen. But in all fairness, there was the rare instance where it was reported accurately, including by Peter Alexander of NBC News.
Trump in Arizona went after Cheney, arguing she would not favor war if she was sent to the front lines.
Again, I applaud Peter Alexander for telling the truth here. As for the rest of NBC News, not so much.
Violent threats. Donald Trump suggests sending Liz Cheney to war and says she should have guns trained on her face.
So now Trump is violently threatening to send Cheney to war. Yeah, sure.
Graphic rhetoric once again overtaking the campaign trail. Former President Trump going after Liz Cheney, saying she wouldn't be a war hawk if, quote, guns are trained on her face. During an event in Arizona last evening in which he said his foe, former Republican Congresswoman Liz Cheney, would not be such a war hawk if she had, quote, guns trained on her face. Mr. Trump saying, let's put her with a rifle standing there with 9 barrels shooting at her. Trump today saying he was only pointing out that Cheney hasn't had to face the consequences of war. But given the dark imagery of his words last night, it makes you wonder if those same words were spoken by a 14-year-old online or in a classroom or by a coworker in the workplace. Would alarm bells be sounding tonight?
And as if it couldn't get any worse, we now have nightly news anchors pontificating. You don't hate the media enough, America. Now, taking Trump out of context, well, that's nothing new. The bloodbath hoax, the dictator on day one hoax, the fine people on both sides hoax. At this point, it's expected. But this one is comparatively different. It's fear-mongering at its worst.
Now you have this threat against Liz Cheney that Trump is talking about a firing squad.
He basically called for executing Liz Cheney, his political rival, saying to stand her up in front of a firing squad.
He actually suggested that Liz Cheney should face a firing squad.
Trump was suggesting a firing squad.
Suggesting that we'll put Liz Cheney in front of a firing squad.
But Trump said, let's put her with a rifle standing there with 9 barrels shooting at her. You don't give someone who is supposed to be executed by firing squad a rifle. But you know, if you're a Democrat with an agenda, logic goes right out the window.
Kill with a firing squad his political opponents, including a political opponent in his own party.
He's talking about a firing squad for his political enemies.
You have Donald Trump, who's talking about sending a prominent Republican to the firing squad.
Liz Cheney needs to be in a firing squad with 9 barrels shooting at her.
Talking about a firing squad for a fellow Republican, fellow American, out of bounds of the norms.
Donald Trump talking about a firing squad for Liz Cheney.
Well, when he says 9 barrels shooting at her, that obviously evokes images of a firing squad. It evokes images of an execution, does it not?
No, Jim Acosta. No, it doesn't. Well, not to normal people anyway. Anyway, to no one's surprise, Drudge Report took the incident and turned it up to 11 by saying that Trump calls for Cheney's execution. And everyone went along with it.
Trump calls for Cheney execution.
Yeah.
And he says that she should have 9 guns trained at her face.
I don't think you even need to call it fired upon. He's saying quite explicitly and unambiguously that Liz Cheney should be shot, should be executed by firing squad.
Firing squad's an execution.
Let's execute a political opponent who happens to be a woman because I don't like her.
Isn't he evoking images of a firing squad, of an assassination?
Exactly who and how might Donald Trump want to execute if he becomes president? Who does he want to kill if he becomes president?
He said he's going to shoot Liz Cheney. I mean, you know, let's shoot Liz Cheney.
Sounds like to me he just thought she needed to die.
Washed up Democrats like former Senator Claire McCaskill are the first to scream about misinformation and disinformation. But at the same time, they're always the first to spread it.
That soundbite a moment ago from Donald Trump talking about training guns on the face of Liz Cheney. The Trump campaign says that was about foreign policy. Well, we just played it for our viewers and listeners who heard it. Isn't it possible to make the case without using rhetoric like that?
But Donald Trump doesn't talk like someone who's been in Washington for 30 years. He doesn't
training
say it the
guns
way I
on her
would have said it.
face?
No, but that's not what he said. Mario, you guys know that. Come on. I mean, everybody knows exactly what he was saying. What he was saying is, you're so much in favor of war. Yeah, you played a piece of the soundbite, because in another piece of it, he said he would give her a gun to go stand in conflict as well. You don't normally give a gun to someone that's going to be facing a firing squad, which was what much of the media made it sound like. But I think it's truly not just unfair, it's egregious to see that reported the way that it was, along with other things that are out there. I've never seen such a concerted effort. Look, I've always believed there's bias because no one's unbiased, but I've never seen such a concerted effort like what I've seen, especially in the last 2 weeks, among multiple media outlets in this country to, in some cases, breathlessly distort and lie about what's being said and to create and manufacture these gotcha moments against Donald Trump. I've never seen it before.
And here to prove Senator Rubio's point is the former senior advisor to Vice President Kamala Harris.
Apparently, my conservative media friends and conservative folks are saying that the media writ large, the liberal media, has taken Donald Trump's comments out of context yet again when it relates to Liz Cheney, as though Donald Trump has not regularly talked about, you know, turning the levers of the investigative powers of the Department of Justice onto his enemies, as though he has not amplified things like a firing squad and military tribunals.
So Simone Sanders says that conservatives are overreacting to the liberal media's coverage of Trump's Liz Cheney comments, but then seconds later claims that Trump called for Cheney to be placed in front of a firing squad and a military tribunal, which he never said. So much for self-awareness, right? Anyway, that's it for now. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you next time, if there is next time.